Night falls fast in Cedar Hollow. And I mean the kind of dark that presses right up against the windows, so when somebody knocks after sunset, you notice. 3 knocks. Sharp, confident, like the kind of person who never doubts they'll get what they want. That was the night Lorraine Price showed up on my porch, wind swirling behind her like she brought the storm with her. She stood in the glow, hair pinned up so tight it looked painful, coat buttoned all the way to her chin, that practiced HOA president's smile that says neighborly, but never quite hits her eyes. She goes, "We need your place tonight, Eli." Like she's offering me a favor, not demanding something that's mine. And right there, before I'd even kicked my boots off, before I could even ask, "What emergency?" I said, "No, that's how it started." You know what I mean? Sometimes you can feel a fight coming before the first punch gets thrown. Look, my name's Eli Mercer, and my grandparents built this cabin way back when Cedar Hollow was nothing but pines and logging roads, back before the HOA showed up with clipboards and rules for your mailbox paint. The deed's old, real old, paper yellowed, tucked in a rusted metal box under the floor, because that's how you keep things safe out here. The cabin isn't part of the HOA. Never has been. It sits just beyond their line, private land, my land. But I guess when you're Lorraine Price, lines on a map don't mean much if they get in the way. She spun a story about a community emergency, families needing shelter, holding her clipboard like a sword. There were folks behind her, half-hidden, watching, waiting for the queen bee to decide what mattered. I told her I'd check on my neighbors if something was really wrong, then closed the door before she could say more. She left looking satisfied, like she'd just planted something that'd bloom trouble. Didn't take long for that seed to sprout. 2 days, tops. I open the curtains and see a sheriff's car and 3 guys from a towing company. Boots muddy, smiles too polite. You ever meet people who act friendly, but you just know they've already decided what's happening? That's these guys. They talked around me, not to me. That's when I figured out Lorraine wasn't just some busybody. She was working an angle, the kind that ends with her friend's short-term rental business growing by one lakeside cabin. See, to folks like her, community means what I can control. The old cabin is perfect, just secluded enough to rent out, not so remote that you can't find it on Airbnb. This wasn't about kindness. It was about profit. That's the thing with these petty little empires people build when they get a title. Suddenly, other people's property looks like opportunity. Now here's where things get spicy. Act 2, the slow burn. You start getting notices on your door, stamped emergency use. Official as all get out, but with no authority behind them. Letters to neighbors, whispering that my place was designated for temporary shelter. Then, a plow truck showed up, shiny, yellow, and somehow managed to miss every house but mine. The driver was reading texts from Lorraine, not even hiding it. That's when I put up cameras. Not because I wanted a show, but because out here, if somebody wants to tell your story for you, best to have proof. My dog, Ranger, learned to keep watch by the window. I kept a pot of chili on the stove and told myself it'd blow over. That is, until I heard the back door rattle at 4 a.m. You ever wake up knowing it's not just the wind? Flashlights in the yard, 2 guys creeping around like extras in a cheap crime movie. One of them tries the door. Ranger barks. I grab my phone and hit record. I step out with a lantern, voice shaking, but I don't back down. You don't have my permission. They tried to laugh it off, talking about community orders. I told them they'd need a real order, not just a story. That's when the sheriff's lights sliced through the dark. They tried to play it cool, but even in the half-light, you could tell the script had slipped. Lorraine didn't quit, though. She filed for a welfare check, tried to make it sound like I was in danger, like she was worried for my safety. A deputy showed up, boots heavy on the porch, flashlight up. I handed him the deed, the county map with my name right where it belongs. He looked at the papers, then at Lorraine, and you could see doubt flicker across his face. But she was still dialing folks at the station, hoping someone'd push her story through. Here's the thing. When people in power decide you don't matter, they don't stop until somebody tells them otherwise. I thought about letting it slide, letting them use the place for one night. But that's how you lose a little more each time. So I did the only thing I could think of. I went live. Set my phone up, showed the world the deed, the footage, told it straight. Not angry, not dramatic, just facts. You'd be surprised how fast strangers show up when you give them the truth. People from around the state tuned in. Neighbors started texting. The chat filled with folks who'd been burned by Lorraine before. They remembered that plow truck, the way the HOA's emergencies always seemed to benefit the right people. Act 3. Then, the showdown. Lorraine rolled in that afternoon, convoy of cars behind her, plow truck leading like it was a parade. She marched onto my porch, all official, announcing they were executing a requisition for community use. I met her in the doorway. Ranger at my side, tail low, ears high. I could have asked for paperwork, could have let them drag it out. But she wanted a scene. She wanted to look like the hero, not the bully. I told her, you don't get to take private property just because you say it's an emergency. If it's that bad, call 911. Otherwise, get off my land. She said I was stubborn. I said maybe, or maybe I just don't like bullies. Her guy, Cal, tried the door with what looked like a spare key. Did it right in front of the camera. By then, 30,000 people were watching the live stream. Deputies showed up again, this time because the reporter down the road had called them after seeing the feed. Suddenly, it wasn't just my word against hers. It was a whole crowd, and they couldn't all be ignored. In the chaos, Cal's confidence cracked. Lorraine's voice got shrill. A deputy, tired of the drama, cuffed Cal on the porch for attempted unlawful entry. Lorraine tried to threaten lawsuits, counter complaints, the whole works, but it's tough to argue with 30,000 witnesses and a video timestamp. Somebody leaked her emails about community use, along with texts about profit sharing and heirlooms. Every lie she'd built started crumbling, piece by piece. What came after? Not a clean ending, not really. Lorraine quit the board 2 weeks later, blaming stress. The HOA had to vote in a review committee, promising to keep things transparent. Cal took a plea deal. Towing company testified that Lorraine had paid for a friendly inspection. Sheriff's department wrote new rules for welfare checks. Neighbors started asking more questions, reading their own deeds. I fixed the door, patched the scratch where Cal tried the lock, and sat with Ranger by the fire as snow covered up the last footprints. You want a Hollywood ending, but life's not like that. There's no medal, no parade, just a little more peace, and maybe a little more wariness. Standing your ground, it costs something. I lost sleep, said things I wish I hadn't, but I also met folks who'd been waiting for someone to say enough. One old neighbor, hadn't spoken to me in years, showed up with a casserole and offered to help fix the plow paperwork. Sometimes community isn't about rules, it's about people showing up when it counts. I'll tell you this, rights aren't just pieces of paper or lines on a map. They're built on memories and folks willing to hold the line. If someone in power thinks they can rewrite your story just because you're quiet, they'll try it. First, they use your silence. Then, they use other people's indifference. Third, they put on a smile and call it law. We beat that with cameras, with receipts, and with each other. Now, folks ask if it's quieter, and it is, mostly. I keep that old deed handy, sometimes run my thumb along my granddad's signature, just to remind myself why you fight for small things. There's no simple lesson here, no clean line between good and bad. People will try to take what isn't theirs, and sometimes they'll get away with it. Unless you call them out, in public, with the proof. That's all it takes, sometimes. If you've ever had a neighbor cross a line, or seen a community leader try to twist the rules for their own gain, I want to hear it. Drop your story in the comments. What would you have done? Who needs to hear this? Share this with anyone who's forgotten that community means standing together, not just following the loudest voice. And hey, if you're like me, keep the porch light on, but don't open the door for anyone who can't bother to knock and ask.